Hello, hello, and welcome to another episode of After Shadow Space, the series where I just sit down and talk a little bit about, well, the Shadow Space world and more of how I've worked on it, because this is a setting I've worked on for a long time, and I realized that I'll never be able to give all of the information on the world in a diegetic fashion in the campaign. This is the episode meant to complement episode 3 of the Shadow Space tabletop campaign that I'm doing with my friends, so, I will be openly saying spoilers of things relating to the first 3 episodes, so keep that in mind. So that was an interesting episode. I'm actually recording this like the next day because I was so tired at the end of that session because it went so long. There's parts of me that feel like I didn't handle that as great as I could have. And I definitely feel like the Lazarus ship as a whole could be a better fleshed out location if I was able to take a lot more time. And I am not a good level designer. That is one of my weak points as a game master. I cannot design environments super good. And if I ever tried to, or one day I would love to try and release a Shadow Space like campaign book and make the Lazarus one of the missions available. And if I did that, I would love to work with some people who are better at level design than me to make a better layout of the map and better, more detailed maps. The Lazarus is one of the earliest dungeons I ever thought up of when I started working on the setting of Shadow Space. And it comes with it a lot of very interesting things as a result that I can talk a bit about. And I flip around, and here's the thing. As a DM, it's very important for you to bend and modify the settings you've been working on to fit the player group you're with. The group of players I have currently in Shadow Space are not big on the puzzles. They're not big on like the dungeon crawl aspect. And so the Lazarus was very streamlined as a result to be very combat and interaction focused, more than puzzle focused, that like it would be in a more traditional setup. Also, I was not really ever expecting the players to be able to tame or befriend the Geno soldiers, but I thought, even though it was a thing I never planned around, I figured it would be fun to let the players do it if they rolled particularly well, which they did, because justifiably Barbara had all of the character traits and abilities to justify them being able to attempt the skill check. And I would go on to use it as a way to reward them by basically having the NPC companion they have solve the final boss puzzle for them. So let's talk a little bit about that final boss they just fought. The Union leader / cult leader in the bottom of the ship. Because the boss fight went so fast, and because I was trying to streamline the design, because the players very much wanted to get out of the dungeon they were in. I was starting to get the vibe that they were not enjoying being stuck in dungeons. And so that's actually probably going to be a thing going forward, is in future sessions of Shadow Space, I'm probably going to dial back the dungeon settings and put more of a focus on, what's the wording? More of a focus on settlement interaction and overworld exploration. I don't think these players are a big fan of delving into space stations or research facilities, and because of that, that's going to be another aspect of how there's going to be large chunks of the setting of Shadow Space that are probably not going to be shown off in super depth in this campaign. That being said, there will definitely still be dungeons. I'm just going to keep the dungeons to a shrunken scale for this group, because they are not a dungeon crawling group. This ship, I even had to like dramatically decrease the scales I had halfway through the missions, as I realized that the players weren't enjoying dungeon crawling. And like I communicated with them, and I learned that half the group is not a dungeon crawl group, and I'm like, okay, shit. Lazarus is not for this group then. Yeah, so let's talk about that final boss finally. So Shadow Touched and what they are conceptually. So we've already established that in this world, everything is powered by a dark matter, i.e. shadow energy. And shadow energy interacts with our world in sci-fi rigmarole bullshit fashion. And when a person if you come into direct contact with shadow plasma, it rips apart your atoms. That's why shadow laser guns are so fucking dangerous. They rip your atoms apart, and one of the only things that are strongly resistant to it is a shadow plate steel, a metal that is imbued with dark matter. And if a person is exposed to large amounts of dark matter all at once, it will rip their body apart and kill them. But there is this, as we established, very small percentage chance that a small amount of people will just stay alive after what happened. And when this happens, they get crazy fourth-dimensional reality-bending powers. In the case of the final boss, Lazarus, he gained the ability to directly manipulate biological matter. A fun thing the players never got to see is, if they had let their little Geno soldier friend walk up to him, he would have turned it into a full-fledged human. He was going to straight up rewrite their DNA and make them human. Also, all of the people that walked into the walls, I don't know how clearly this was described. He didn't just, like, eat all of the Union members. They went into the walls, into, like, flesh sacks to protect them from the fight that was going on. But I don't think I ever clarified that very well. But if the fight got bad enough, he probably would have started dissolving them and turning them into meat nugget monsters. And mechanically, the way that boss was meant to work was that he had a regeneration factor that would make him heal faster than the party would ever be able to kill him. And there was two ways that the party could have killed him. One of the players has a very powerful special attack that if they fired it off in the correct way, they could have killed him. And the other was blowing up the ship engine, the solution that the NPC companion immediately pointed out as a reward for them getting the NPC companion. And I hope this session helped really hammer home the moral grayness of the world of Shadow Space and this vibe of there will never be a solution in which everybody can be made happy because there's always going to be issues. And I kind of like where the players' mindsets were as these events played out, as the session began. And I'm really looking forward to see how future campaigns play out, or sessions play out with this player group as a result of everything. But yeah. I'm trying to think of if there's anything else I would want to talk about a bit more in terms of like game design that I did, or what I would want with future stuff. But I'm trying to keep things mainly focused on whatever happened in the most recent episode. So the session started, they made their way down, I talked about dungeon crawling, I talked about the boss monster, I talked about what a Shadow Touched is. You saw that the companies are a little bit... So a fun thing with this world is, like, many people have become blind to the hyper-capitalization of their society. Because people have been raised in generations of this hyper-capitalist, bizarre world they're in. Many people don't even question their subservience to the megacorps. And a lot of what they do doesn't feel weird to them. It just makes sense. Like, of course we all live for the corporation and give out everything we have. After all, we wouldn't be here if it weren't for them. They give so much, we might as well give back kind of vibe is what exists amongst the corporate shills. Honestly, a setting that ends up being very similar is Obsidian Entertainment's Outer Worlds, which, let me tell you, I can't describe to you how upset I got when I saw that game. Don't get me wrong, it's an amazing game. I began working on Shadow Space back in, like, 2010, 2011, about, and so much of what I was planning for my setting went into their fucking game, and I was like, fuck! Because, like, Shadow Space in its early drafts leaned very much on 1920s science fiction, something I've pulled away from and gone more towards making my own aesthetic of sci-fi, with, like, very bullet-shaped ships and gravity being used, like, gravity and spatial manipulation being the main means of propulsion of technology, and I've dialed back the amount of versatileness in alien life in order to lean more on the horrors of genetic alteration and the horrors of the Fermi paradox. Because fun fact about Shadow Space, there are no aliens in Shadow Space as far as anybody's ever found. This is to feed on the concept of the Fermi paradox, the fact that realistically, in our own real world, we should have been able to contact aliens by now via radio signals. By calculating how old the universe is, how likely life is to evolve, how much time has passed, how long it takes for technology to advance, there should be hundreds of thousands of alien species that we can communicate with over radio from a huge distance away, but we've heard nothing but silence. And Shadow Space actually leans onto this this concept, and I'm gonna go ahead and talk about this idea I have of one of the posed solutions of the Fermi paradox is the first race solution or theory, that humans were the first intelligent race to evolve in the universe. And until I decide otherwise, that is the internal logic of Shadow Space. Now, is that me saying right now there will never be aliens in Shadow Space? No. Is that me saying humans are definitively the first intelligent race to evolve in Shadow Space? No. Is that me saying that currently within my own internal building of the logic of the world for the purposes of my narrative planning, that is the case currently? Yes. Am I willing to change that? Yes. Are people who run their own Shadow Space setting allowed to change that? Of fucking course. Throw out anything you don't like if you run your own sci-fi setting using Shadow Space. But so currently that's sort of the logic of all sentient life in the galaxy is tracing back to humans. And even I've begun work on a sequel book for Shadow Space. Yeah, before the main Shadow Space book is even out, I know. But a concept of a setting that takes place 100 million years in the future, or 100 billion years in the future, in which the mega corporations have crumbled in a entirely different form of... It's meant to focus on a less hard sci-fi, more of a Star Wars vibe, and in my rough notes of that setting, a fun thing with Star Trek, this is a tangent that'll make sense. Star Trek, when it began, wanted to add aliens, but because of the limited budget of the show, all the aliens just looked like humans in bad makeup. And as Star Trek went on, they actually made that a part of the lore and explained that all life across the galaxy was seeded by one race that looked humanoid. And that's why all life in the galaxy looks humanoid, because they all share a common ancestor. And in my theoretical Shadow Space sequel setting I'm working on, humans are the precursor race. You know how, like, in sci-fi, there's the trope of, like, the ancient lost alien race who permeated the galaxy and seeded it with their intelligence, and all life across the galaxy share this common bond of a creator race. Humans are the creator race in this theoretical Shadow Space sequel, but not out of any altruistic intent, but out of just our insistence on permeating the galaxy mixed with the existence of genetic splicing in current Shadow Space. But, you know, that's all a theoretical thing I'm working on. As Shadow Space stands right now, humans are a greedily expanding mega corporation-focused race. And anyone who breaks from that format face the full wrath of the megacorps. And, like, I will say, as we go and more of the laws of Shadow Space begin to be explained, it is gonna make zero fucking sense. And there is an intention to that, in that Shadow Space's world is intended to be a parody of capitalism. Something that I'm sure you've already begun to see with the fact that anybody who is evil is referred, like, there's not space pirates in this setting. There aren't raiders. There are unionists. There aren't evil cults of Lovecraftian gods. There are unionists. Either you're part of the megacorps or you're a unionist. And like that's an intentional tongue-in-cheek poke at capitalism that this setting is meant to focus on. In fact, the layer that goes deeper that you guys probably haven't been able to see is how leveling up works in Shadowspace. See, a lot of RPGs get reward experience. Oh, every time you defeat a monster or succeed in a skill check or finish a mission, you get experience points that work towards you leveling up. Well, in Shadowspace, excuse me, in Shadowspace, the way that it is working is, money is the experience points. There is no leveling up through natural means. You level up by getting money, going to a store, and buying body augmentations. You want a better gun? Go buy a better gun. You want to punch harder? Buy an injection that gives you stronger muscles. You want to learn a new skill? Buy a brain implant that either codes your brain to have the information or puts a chip in you that makes you know the info. The Shadowspace setting, as I work on the rulebook, is very much intended to be a piss take of capitalism, and that goes all the way down to the mechanics of the leveling. One day I want to either write a full-fledged Shadowspace TTRPG book, or maybe even make a video game set in the Shadowspace world that would take the form of an immersive sim game. In fact, I will say, if I ever do that, the Lazarus ship will serve as the blueprint. I have a lot of ways that the Lazarus would be expanded. There was, like I said, this Lazarus was supposed to be much bigger than it was in this session, but like I cut a bunch of fat and a lot of combat encounters because I realized this player group isn't about like the rapid heavy like when they started walking through a bunch of empty rooms. My original plan was to put a bunch of fights in there where they would fight a bunch more of the meat monsters, but this player group in the background outside let me know the combat is not what they're here for. They're not here for dungeon crawling, they're not here for puzzles, and they're not here for combat. So I'm not saying those things won't be present, I'm saying I'm going to try and reduce those and focus more on what these players want, which is role-playing with NPC characters and learning stories of worlds and environments. And so because of that, this session actually had a bunch of combat counters and stuff cut. And I'm gonna actually talk a lot more about my internal notes of my expanded Lazarus I'm working on for the full rulebook. I plan on increasing the number of factions present on the Lazarus and increasing the scale of the Lazarus ship. You may have noticed that scale was a thing I was playing very fast and loose with, and it's because this group was sort of playtesting this setting to give me what I wanted, and like, I want, like, my plan in a full-fledged Lazarus is that the factions at play will be the corporation members, who will be holed up at the top of the ship, a rogue AI aboard the ship who's taken control of the security system and is trying to basically make kill all biological life forms on the ship and make this ship its own thing. The rogue Geno soldiers who are trying to kill everything else on the ship and take control of it so that they can go off and form their own life. And the Union, living down in the other place. In this, I sort of fused the narrative of the Geno soldiers and the rogue AI thing together to reduce the size of the ship. Or the size of the mission, I mean. But long term, there would be like a separate lab floor and security floor where these two different factions would be at play. And in a game format or a full campaign format, the players would be able to pick and choose a side they'd want to be with, but there would be no reasonable way to get all four sides to work together, because the ultimate issue is every side of this fight is diametrically opposed to each other. The robot just wants to be given rights and to be able to live its own life as it chooses fit and not be a slave. But every other faction views AI as a slave. The Geno soldiers just want to live a comfortable life and be on their own and not be bothered by anybody, but every other faction views them as a slave and less than human. The corporation just wants control of their own fucking ship back and to get rid of anybody who's in the way of that. And Union wants to kill the corporation who wronged them and views the other two factions as subhuman and not deserving to live. Except for the fact that the Lazarus cult would in fact want to reprogram the Geno soldiers into humans. So those two factions actually could live in harmony in a right setup, and skilled enough and charming enough players could probably convince the AI and Geno soldiers to work together and become allies in a full-fledged version of this setting. But in the end, the Union and the corporation would never work together. The Union would never acknowledge that AI has an independent being, and the corporation would never like any of the other factions. Like, there was a lot more layers I had planned to this narrative, but, like, it came down to the players I don't think enjoyed the stuck on a space station vibe of it. Or stuck on a spaceship vibe. In the future, I'm going to try and give them environments that have a lot more freedom of travel, is the plan. Especially going into the next arc as we wrap up the Lazarus ship and they figure out what their next job they're going to get is. But yeah. I think that's more or less everything I want to talk about. And I haven't mentioned this, but give me your questions in the comments down below. I would love to answer more information of what this world is for all of you asking. Now, there will very likely be a delay of a couple of weeks between episodes. Like, questions you ask in this episode won't be answered until 2, 3, or even 4 episodes down the line. Like, for context, as of the moment I'm recording this, Shadow Space Episode 1 has only just gone live. And this is the aftermath of episode 3, and that gap will likely only grow as I build the backlog more and more. Because like the reason this series is bi-weekly is because I want to make sure that if there's ever a case of weeks where the players can't meet, I still have a backlog of a safety net. That because tabletop campaigns are, anybody who plays them understands, very hard to get players together for sometimes. But anyway, that's it for this episode of After Shadow Space. I hope you all come back next week for more, and hey, if you enjoy tabletop stuff, go check out the Fallout Retold series. Love all you very, very much, and ta-ta for now!